Happy Monday, guys.
Yes,
Monday.
good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Is it Maligayang? No,
Lunes.
magandang hapon.
Hapon.
Yes, hapon. It's a little too early for gabi. Yes. See?
Gabi.
Gabi. Yes.
I only know gusto ko pagkain.
Gusto mo pagkain.
Yeah, teach you that one next time. Yeah, so we're gonna keep the instructional methods train rolling. Today we're gonna be looking at chaining and start looking at some of the different prompts we may use until, yeah, probably Thursday we'll start covering the error correction procedures. So kind of bring it all together. Great. Yes.
No signal.
No signal. That's not good. I hasn't done this in a while.
Okay.
What happened?
I think possibly could be the other HDMI input.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, all right.
Great. At any rate, today we'll do task analysis chaining and then talk about some prompting. Okay. Whenever we want to teach a complex skill to not just clients, but even pretty much anyone, it's best to be able to break down that complex task into very small and manageable steps. So for instance, even something as simple as making your bed can have many different components. And teaching somebody who already has a difficult time learning, you're gonna have to state, okay, how should you take off the sheets? How do you then place on the covers, or where do you place the pillows? All these things are things you have to consider when you're teaching these complex tasks. So the best thing for us to do is create what is referred to as task analysis. That is taking the complex tasks and breaking them all down into very easy, manageable steps. And we do this already with some of the clients. Yeah, they have daily living skills, vocational skills, such as hand washing. Hand washing is going to be a big one with some of the examples we were looking at for chaining procedures, because there is a lot of steps involved. So let's take a look further. Typically, the design or the creation of a task analysis falls on, well, me, but it's always useful to have your guys' inputs too, because you probably would have a better gauge as to the client's ability. And a task analysis for something like hand washing is not one size fits all, because everybody's going to have their different strengths and weaknesses. So we want to be able to accommodate and individualize their task analysis so then the client's actually able to learn the skill. So yeah, best way for us to start would be to perform this task yourself and then write down each instance or action that you take. And then you can also just observe somebody who's already competent in doing it and then report from them, and then, yeah, refine it to client needs. So there are a few different chaining procedures. This first one is forward chaining. This is when we teach the components of the task analysis in order. So we start with step 1, then we move on to step 2, step 3. The main thing we're trying to emphasize in a forward chaining procedure is we're teaching the client the first step. So we would typically begin with that one being prompted. And then from the rest of the steps, we do it all for them. So every other step is completely prompted to the least intrusive prompt needed. So we teach them the first step. And then once they got that down, then we teach them the second. But we still maintain us completing the rest of the steps for them. And then little by little, as they move on to the steps and they're able to master each one, that is when they'll fully acquire the skill. And this is pretty useful when starting off the task is a little bit easier. You can kind of allow the client to get a little bit of behavioral momentum as they get some successful trials in, then the more complex things that come there down the line should come a little bit more easy. Let's take a look at forward chaining. So this is
I should say, Grace, so Thomas, in our school classroom, we are going to do forward training on learning how to watch that. So this shows you already knows the first step for watching things is to forward. So next, you need to let your hand on. So, and then move right arms together for 20 seconds. And then you grab your hand back. And take our paper towel. And dry your hair. Only more than if you paper towel. So that's how you don't get like cancer. You got it. No, that's our first step. Now you get the dough. Watch for 20 seconds. Next step. And let's go back to water. Good job. Now let's do it again. And do that. 20 seconds. Next one. Dry your hands. Good job. Now, let's see if you can. My hands are going to be very clean.
Yeah. Oh. You guys get the idea. So those first two, let's say, complete chains, that is more of modeling, kind of her telling her what to do. It was only really in that last one where she allowed her to do the entire thing, and then she provided the verbal prompts. Slightly problematic that she was using verbal prompts when it's a more motor skill, but we'll get into that in a little bit when we talk about prompting. But that is the general idea. Begin with the first step, and then you complete the rest of the chain with prompting, with help. So now, take a look at backwards chaining, performing every step except for the very last one. From the top, step 1, 2 to 3. You're performing all of them. You're doing 1 and 2, but then you're teaching 3. Prompting that very last one. And the idea here is, since it's the very last step, the client or the individual is going to come in contact with the reinforcer. And what this looks like is typically natural reinforcers. So if you're teaching somebody how to, let's say, assemble themselves a snack, they finish the last step, and then bam, they got their snack. Yeah, so this is ideal for individuals who, let's say, lack motivation. You can kind of think of this as implementing demand fading. So you're not asking them to complete the whole entire task. You're only asking them to complete this just small portion. They do the thing again. Do the thing again. And because you're reducing the demand, then that actually makes it easier for those individuals who engage in problem behavior or escape maintenance. Because as soon as they finish that final step, bam, they'll get what they want. And when you teach the second step, they already got the last one mastered, so then it gets easier as it goes along. So that is backward chaining. So we saw an example of backwards or forward chaining. Why is it doing that? With hand washing, let's take a look at what it looks like with backwards chaining. And I think this one's a little bit more accurate. Let's see what it was.
Thanks for coming to the sink. Let's turn on. Nice and wet. Okay. Scrub, scrub, scrub. Nice. Scrubbing so many bubbles. Nice rinsing. 3, 2, 1. You rinsed your hands. No more bubbles on your hands.
Which step did they do independently?
The drying of their hands.
Yes, the drying of their hands. Everything else was prompted as it should have been. If this is the learner's first instance of learning to wash their hands, it's all going to be physically prompted, except for that very last step. So you guys acknowledge it is to dry off their hands. He's probably going to trace for that. And a natural consequence of washing your hands is having clean hands. How fun. Let's take a look at this example with writing.
Average chain is used to teach a complex skill that involves a sequence of behaviors. Before sitting down with a child, it is important to create a task analysis. A task analysis is simply creating a list of each step in the process. This helps to identify any of the smaller steps in the process that may need to be perfected before we can complete the more complex task at hand. Today, we're going to demonstrate how to spell and write the word dog. First, I will start by writing the word dog on the whiteboard and reading it out loud, asking Brittany to repeat the word dog. Can you say the word dog, Brittany? Dog. Good job, Brittany. It is important that you reward the child immediately after they have performed the desired behavior. In this case, I rewarded Brittany immediately after she said dog. Next, I will have Brittany write the word dog while I hold the marker in her hand. Ready? D. G. Dog, Brittany. Now, I need to write D-O and ask Brittany to write the letter that comes next. Can you write the next letter, Brittany? Now that Brittany has written the letter G, we will move on to the letter O. Brittany must now write OG in order to receive a reward. In backwards chaining, once the child can complete the last step in the process, you should move on to the next step, no longer rewarding the already learned behavior, which in this case is writing the letter G. So here, I'm going to write the letter G and ask Brittany to complete the word. Can you finish the word for me? Brittany? Finally, I'll ask Brittany to write the word dog, and she should write dog. Hey, can you write the word dog all by yourself now? Good job. This completes the task of teaching Brittany how to spell dog using backwards chaining.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. And the natural reinforcer of that is now you have the word you want it to be written out. Yeah, so that is backwards chaining. Starting from the very end to teaching them. And yeah, we're working backwards. Okay. Then we have total task chaining. So instead of prompting from the very beginning, like you do in forward chaining, or prompting at the very end for that last step, like you're doing backwards, here you're prompting all throughout when necessary. So you have the entire task laid out in the task analysis, and where needed, that is when you would introduce the prompts. And ultimately, this would benefit clients who already have a good grasp of the skill. If there might just be some little areas where they may struggle, or they are quick learners, and that could be something that could help them learn that much quicker. So it's prompting through the entire task when necessary. Let's just do learning short. I think we watched enough hand washing today as is. So just wanted to take a notice as to when they begin prompting.
Alright, so we're gonna hold the button right here. Button, 2 fingers, good job. And push it in. Push it in. Right, okay, just like that, okay? Just like that. Next. Hold it. Good job. It's good. And then, you're doing great. Good job, man. All right, let's try this one. Again, button. There. And all right, let's try this one. Doing great, buddy. All right, we're gonna push it in here. Okay. Right here. Oh, hold it on this side. Hold it on this side. 6. Ready? Pull it. 0. Awesome. Good job.
Yeah, that's a tricky one to do just because of how much fine motor it requires. But as you see, she gave some verbal prompts for it to hold it. And then, I mean, her hands were never really letting go when he was putting the button in. But you can see that there was prompting done throughout, and she only provided more intrusive ones when it was necessary. So watch enough hand washing. Okay, just some things to keep in mind for when we do implement, and I'd include these on here. I think we already covered a little bit, just a nice little reminder. Forward chaining, again, is best used for when the initial steps in the task analysis are a bit simpler. That way you can build that momentum for those more difficult ones later in the analysis. But then for backwards chaining, this is for individuals who engage in escape maintain behavior. They don't like demands or tasks all that much. So we start from the very end, prompt that, and then bam, they got the reward, they got the reinforcer, and we can build off of there. Again, same idea behind demand feeding. And then whole task analysis. This is for individuals who already can get a good grasp of the skill. There are just some little areas and steps that we could address with a little bit more precision. And this is for, again, those learners who can much more quickly acquire these skills that are trying to teach them. Okay, these are on here. So for chaining, one of the important things that we want to do, and this is kind of the case for any single instructional method, is to consistently reinforce, but only reinforce the new target. So let's say we're teaching somebody to wash their hands, and they can dry them off and turn off the sink, no problem. However, they have a difficult time rubbing their hands together. This is the third step in this task analysis. So we don't reinforce the drying of the hands or turning off the sink. We're only going to reinforce those instances where they do lather their hands under the sink. Yeah, and the best idea behind something like backwards chaining is that contact of natural reinforcement. So we're not necessarily doing it for the praise or a snack or an edible reinforcer. No, it's you get your hands washed, you make roads your kinds of things that we want to have be the reinforcers. And then we also want overcorrecting. We're going to talk about error correction a little bit later in the week. But suffice to say that the only teaching moments are for those targeted steps in the analysis. We're not using the entire thing as a learning opportunity. No, it's just If they're doing a backwards chaining and they got the last 2 steps down, then we're only going to do the one above that. That way, we don't make the learning process any more demanding than it already is, and we don't want them to get burnt out over tasks. I'm pretty straightforward enough. I'm sure we all would fall into that gagging where we're asked to do one thing and then all of a sudden all these other tasks or demands are placed on us. Nobody wants that. Yes, and we want to keep in mind, just with any data collection, usually like we were talking about a few weeks ago, we are only looking forward to independence. It doesn't matter if they're still taking time to acquire the skill. Just because it's finished doesn't necessarily mean it's been acquired. If it requires just a little bit more prompting, then that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly all right. But what is most important is that there is a little bit of progress, even if we're just moving from one lesson choosing prop to the other. Yeah, and we also don't want to be too quick into jumping in. And of course, if there is a matter of safety, that is a concern. So for instance, if we're teaching somebody to use a paper shredder, then of course we should have our guard up a little bit to make sure their finger doesn't end up anywhere that it shouldn't be. Yes.
Where is the?
Where is that not on there?
No, it is.
Oh, I haven't.
Just flip it the next page.
But it's on there, right?
No.
It's cut off. I'm sorry, guys. This was the last bit anyway. From that. Okay. Yeah, it's all right to let somebody contact the consequences of some errors. Now, again, consequence, we're just thinking about it as what happens right after the behavior. So if we're left with somebody's name being slightly crooked or them not holding something the correct way, it's perfectly fine. We're not expecting perfection of clients, just as we don't apply that standard on us. It also means that we don't apply that to them. So you can just write down, it is a right to allow the client to experience natural consequences of minor errors. Yes, minor errors. Yeah, because again, in this world, we want to strive for the best, not necessarily perfection. I think there's a quote out there that perfection is the enemy of progress. And I can certainly agree with that. All right, thank you guys for being flexible with this. How you guys writing that? Let me share with you one of my experiences of implementing backward chaining.
Okay.
Yeah, I was working with a teenage client. I would go to her home after her school, so this was around 4 most days. And then she wanted to work on being able to cook on her own. We began with some simple sandwich assembly for her. We started off with her being able to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for herself. And we would start off our sessions with the sandwich, because that would also just be her snack. And because right after we would be done with our session, around 6:30, she would then have her dinner. But the problem was, she would make her snack, and then I would have to sit there and wait for her to finish. And this was right at the beginning of the session, so she kind of, I think at times, recognized that, oh, I can use up a lot of our session time So we have to figure out something to do that for that. But yeah, it's always really practical to be able to use chaining when teaching these skills. Yes, this was something that we've been reiterating time and time again. We're not striving for perfection. The most important thing is, the individual's making progress. And if we're kind of being a little bit too demanding, that might lead to some inadvertent effects, such as prompt dependency, finding aversion to the task, it being frustrating, and we do not want that. Yeah, again, we ourselves have to be flexible, just as we ask the clients to be flexible. Intake. Require flexibility with everything. I think it was just that last little bit. So tough. Okay. So the questions I included here are a little less conceptual and theoretical. It's more us being able to apply it with the clients. Let's see if we can get together. Okay, you are teaching a client to use a microwave to heat their lunch. The client becomes easily frustrated when they don't immediately see the results. Which chain procedure would be most effective here, in this case? Backwards chaining here. Yes, it's backward chaining. That's exactly right. Now, if we're designing a task analysis, what would be the last step what will be the step we teach? What do you guys think? So we're trying to teach somebody to heat up their lunch using the microwave. What should be the last step for them to immediately start eating their food? What do you guys think? There are no wrong answers here. What was that, Richie?
Open the microwave.
Open the microwave. Yes, that is a great last step to teach. Yes, so easy. Yeah, open the microwave and then boom, your food's right there. Awesome. Yeah, that would probably be what we would start off. Exactly. That's probably what we start off with teaching. Yes. A vocational task involves 10 steps to package letters in an envelope. Oh boy. The client already knows how to do several of these steps, but forgets the sequence. Which method would be most appropriate here? So here in forward. So they already know how to do the steps. They just might not be sure how to do them in order. Okay. Sarah's saying C. Everybody else in agreement with C? Total task? Yes, that's right. Total task. Yeah, the client already has a good gauge as to the 10 steps required to open the envelope, put the letter in, and then seal it. Then they probably just need a few reminders here and there for them to fully get the skill down. Awesome. When using forward chaining to teach a client to log into a computer, what should the staff do after the client independently completes the first step? So turning it on. So again, we're using forward chaining here.
A. Yeah.
Are you guys sure it's not C?
Sure.
Yeah, the lecture on why online safety is important. Yeah, then the client, if they wants to use the computer inside the quiet room, most likely just gonna listen to music. Knowing some of the clients in this room. Yeah, so it's A. We is A because all we're asking for is to turn on the computer. Once they got that, then we can move on to the next step, which is probably typing in the username. And even that, we can break it down to further chains if they're not too familiar with typing. That's where we stop. In a backwards chaining procedure for making a sandwich, when does the client receive the most enthusiastic praise and the primary reinforcer?
D.
Hearing D, D, D?
Yeah.
Yes. Uh-huh. What is the primary reinforcer in this instance?
Making the sandwich.
The sandwich, yes. The sandwich is the reinforcer here. And of course, we can throw in a little bit of praise here and there, just to rev up the reinforcement. Yeah. Here in this case, it's sandwich. If you are creating a task analysis or cleaning a table, what is the most reliable way to ensure you haven't missed any of the steps?
D.
Hearing
Yes.
DDD?
DDD.
Yes. Yeah, don't necessarily want to work from memory because again, we're not applying that to the client. I think the client should be the last person you ask because they don't know how to, by definition, they're learning how to do the skill. So how can you ask somebody who doesn't know what to do? And then, yeah, generic guide, it has to be individualized to the client. So D is the only answer that makes sense. Same. Okay, I just had one. Okay, so that is chaining. Seems like we got a good grasp on the 3 different types. Yeah, let's move on to the different kinds of prompts we may use throughout the chaining procedures, discrete trials, and even some of the natural environmental training opportunities. Oh, please tell me that's in there. Okay. Whew. So response prompts are the ones that are most, the ones that we use that are most common. So this is your typical verbal prompts. So being able to instruct the clients as to what to do, to be able to give them the hint they need. Gesture, as we've discussed, pointing, nodding, looking towards the item, modeling, so performing it first, then having the client do it, and then physical, whether that be partial or hand over hand or full physical. These are all some that I'm sure by now we've done dozens and dozens of times. Okay, so those are our response prompts. Yeah, I don't feel like I need to spend too much time on them too. So I think we kind of take a good use of them throughout our days here. Okay, looking at stimulus prompts, these are a little bit less common, but this is instead of us providing a supplement or the hint required for the client to give the correct response, this is modifying the stimuli or materials in such a way to make the answer more obvious. And stimulus prompts come in 3 distinct flavors. So the first one would be a positional prompt. This is where you're placing the correct item closer to the client than the other distractor items. So let's say you're asking them to identify where something is, or you're going to place the correct item much closer to them, so then it's more obvious. So yeah, so we'll see what this looks like here.
Movement.
Yeah, you switch one more time.
Oh.
Yes, you eat with the spoon, not the fork or knife. So the fact that she brought it closer to the learner shows that that is the correct. That was the correct item. Yeah, the 2 other stimulus prompts that we're looking at are movement prompts. This is where you either tap or shake the correct item in such a way to draw it to the client's eyes. So for instance, I may ask, Jonathan, where is the bottle?
Yeah. No, you're shaking.
Shaking. Where? In your
Yeah,
hand?
tap it, the movement.
Good. Okay, how about this?
Tendency, hindi ka natin, hindi ka natin.
Jonathan, point to the puzzle. Yes, good pointing. Very good. Good job, Jonathan. Yes. Cookie. Cookie, yes. We'll see about that one. Okay, so that's movement prompting. And then we also have redundancy prompts. So this is making the correct item a different color, size, or shape. Again, just making it much more obvious that, hey, this is the correct answer and these others aren't. So I have an example of here. Actually, I'm gonna have a different volunteer. Who have I picked on? Actually, yeah, Tommy. Can you please point to the sad face? Okay, that's thank you. I'm guessing this one.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, that you're correct. But that was very creative too. I like that. Yeah, so this would be an example of redundancy problem. You notice how much smaller these are. So yeah, the individual is most likely going to guess for that one. And the way you would begin to fade this would be making that one smaller and smaller until it's the same size as those two. But we'll talk about that on Thursday. So those are the, okay, yeah, those are all the prompts. So yeah, we got, again, we have our various response prompts. These are the ones that we introduce to the client. So then they give the correct answer. We've done several of these before in the past. Then we have stimulus prompts. This is where we're changing the item or the stimulus itself, either by changing the position, tapping it, or making it bigger or smaller, or changing the size and shape. Let's get to it. I think you guys are in good shape. And RBT is teaching a client to choose healthy snacks. The RBT places an apple 6 inches closer to the client than the bag of chips. What type of prompt?
C.
Yes, positional prompt. It moves closer, so that means is a great likelihood that they would choose that as the right answer. Very good. To help a client find their locker, staff member points to the specific locker door from across the room.
Yes.
This is
G. B.
B?
Yeah, just wrong.
Yes, gestural. Yeah, I can think of 1 or 2 clients who would really benefit from having this kind of prompt.
Baba.
I was thinking Bobby. Yeah, Bobby. Gesture prompts. RBT is teaching a client to identify a stop sign. RBT uses a flashcard where the stop sign is twice the size of other signs on the table. What is this?
Redundant.
Hearing A, hearing D. Let's see what it is. Yes, redundancy. Yes, redundancy again. We're changing the shape,
Shape,
color,
size.
the size, whatever it is we can to make the answer much more obvious. Yes, so just like what we did, here. Let's see. Staff members demonstrate the entire sequence of wiping a table with a towel while the client watches. What type of prompt?
Modeling.
Yes, very good. Modeling. Typically with model, if we're teaching somebody to follow a model, the SD would be do this. Then they would do it and they get a lot of praise. RBT taps the enter key on the keyboard. I would do it, but it would mess up my keyboard. To draw attention to the client's eyes to it. This is considered a, thought I heard it whispered out there. Another
B. Movement.
movement, yes. Just like this. This.
Armando.
That's what it is.
Armando.
That's a sign. That would be a mind. But if he had something in his hand while he's doing it, it could be a movement prompt for whatever that item is. But yeah, no, that is just accurate. All right, guys. I think this is the last one. RBT provides a light touch to the client's elbow to guide their arm towards the trash can. This is a
D.
yes.
But partial, not partial.
Partial, yes.
We said partial.
Partial. I even look at that. He even told me that I messed it up. Partial. Partial physical prompts, yes. It'll be a full physical if you're making much more contact with clients. But since it's a light touch on the elbows, that is simply a partial. Great. All the answers clear, guys? Everything made sense? Great. Yeah. Any questions before we move on? Everyone's good? We'll pick this back up Thursday. Of course.